Hi, everybody. It's Sunday School Bonanza time. We're going to bring you a rundown of a gospel doctrine lesson to get you prepared to go to gospel doctrine, whether you are teaching or sharing or receiving, or helping, or all those things Joey says on Friends in that one episode. Anyway, a lot of good stuff going on. And bear in mind, this is a supplement to your gospel doctrine experience. We do not produce this at This Week in Mormons for as a replacement for you going to gospel doctrine. If we find out about that, we will go to your ward and find you and pull you by the ear.
All those people in the foyer and with their headphones on just listening to this episode instead of being in class is a problem.
Yeah, people don't realize that part of the TWIM army means that we can mobilize forces to find you wherever you may be. So live in fear of our power. Absolutely. I'm joined, that wonderful voice you hear is leading LDS's Kurt Frankham. Hi, Kurt.
Hey, I'm back. I'm happy
Kurt's
to be
back.
here. Talk about
Please visit the man.
Leadership and bad leadership today.
Yeah, we got a good lesson this week. And make sure to visit Kurt at leadinglds.com and subscribe to the Leading LDS podcast, which is quite enjoyable. Honestly, I find them to be very, very worthwhile and good. And
Thank you.
I want to spread the word and make sure that Kurt gets the love for having, how would I describe it, actual worthwhile, sincere podcasts on the topic of leadership. You don't have a lot of snark in them, which is actually, I think, a good thing.
That's right. I own the field. There's nobody else that's doing what I'm doing. So
yeah, I know. I used to say that when we started This Week in Mormons, and then some other unnamed ones that are synonymous with that big gymnasium we have at our church buildings decided to copy our format, but that's another topic for another time. This week's lesson, or maybe it is this topic. This week's lesson is lesson 27, the influence of righteous leaders. So sure, could apply anywhere. I love this lesson. I think there's some great material here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a sad story. Again, I'm getting tired of this plot line of good guy goes evil, makes other lives miserable, and we see it. Sadly, again,
we see it a lot. We see it a lot, though, in the Old Testament, unfortunately. But I think there are some strong lessons to learn here. Israel is sort of falling apart at this point, and there's some good stuff to learn. Now, the lesson has an attention activity, but I've got one that I propose might be a little bit better.
Let's hear it.
Okay? We'll see if it's worthwhile or not. So, you get two volunteers, have them face away from each other, and then they both have a set of building blocks or something like that, or Jenga, whatever you want, right? And then have one of them build something on their own, and then sitting there, not facing the other person, instruct that person how to build the same thing. All of this without seeing one another. And so I've done this in the past, and it's a reasonably useful object lesson because inevitably stuff goes wrong. You find that there might be breakdowns in communication from the leader instructing or the listener not listening well enough or the fact that the listener cannot observe the good works of the leader at the same time. And so you find that little disconnect there can result in a little bit of futility as they try to get stuff done. And it's pretty fascinating, actually, to see how people communicate when they cannot see one another and can only describe what has to be done. So I found this to effectively illustrate how leaders have a good burden to ensure that the right things are done.
Did you rip that off from the additional teaching ideas? Is that what's happening?
I don't know what I did. I don't know what
It's
I did.
at the
I taught
end.
This lesson a while ago.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess additional teaching ideas number 4 talks about the blocks. So they
actually
well.
put that in there because I suggested it.
Oh, yes, it's right there. Please see Jeff Openshaw. That's correct.
I wrote them a lesson. See, years ago on the General Sunday School board was one of my BYU teachers, and I wrote him and said, I've got this idea. Maybe you can add this to the curriculum.
It's a good idea.
He said, sure. Now, for a little bit of backstory, of course, Israel in general, we got the 12 tribes in the breakdown, right?
Yes.
I hope everyone understands that. I know we talk about the northern tribes and the southern tribes eventually, and how it works out is the lion's share of the tribes are in the northern half of the kingdom. And from the very earliest days of the settlement of Canaan, there had always been rivalry between the two most powerful tribes in Israel, which were Ephraim and Judah. Okay, Judah was in the south, Ephraim was in the north. Okay, so you've got Rehoboam, who was Solomon's son, so he's the rightful heir to the throne. Now, northern Israel in general did not really support Rehoboam, and they wanted to renounce their ties to the throne of David. They didn't have the freedom to do this, but this is what they wanted to do. Now, and eventually there's a call for a meeting to discuss the leadership of the kingdom, to make Rehoboam king. But you know where they hold this meeting?
Where's that?
Do you know, Kurt?
In the culture hall?
They hold it in Shechem, Now, Shechem is interesting because it's actually an ancient gathering place for the tribe of Ephraim in the northern area. So northern tribes actually saw this as an opportunity to transfer the government to Jeroboam, who was an Ephraimite. And so you're going to actually see how much this politicking and these regional rivalries they result in bad decisions from both leaders, by the way, from Rehoboam and Jeroboam, but it affects everybody. And you'll see how much a good leader could actually have made a difference in keeping Israel together.
Yeah, and so Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, as you mentioned, he has a real opportunity to be a fantastic leader. He's set up to really free this people because Solomon really, in the remainder of his life, really kind of goes crazy and flat out has slavery going on. And for every house of Israel except Judah, because that was Solomon's tribe. And so as Rehoboam comes in, his advisors are telling him, listen, or the people in general are saying, listen, you need to take this burden off of us. I mean, we're willing to compromise. We'll be a slave maybe sometime. But they, he has a real opportunity to do it. But no, he doubles down and puts even a higher burden on them because he's listening to his younger advisors that are more his friends. So
rather than the elder statesmen.
Yes.
Because the elder statesmen basically tell him, take the yoke off the people's back and they will love you and they will serve you and they will be there for you.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah,
right?
and it's perfect in 1 Kings 12, verse 7, it says, and they spake unto him, saying, if thou wilt be a servant unto this people this day, and wilt serve them, and answer them, and speak good words to them, they will be thy servants forever. Such a perfect leadership principle of if the leader takes on the burden and becomes, acts as their servant to some degree and shows them love, then they will love you and serve you forever. I mean, it's a win-win for both parties. But Rehoboam is young and naive and is not a good leader.
And it's kind of funny how he's influenced, I think, that much by younger advisors saying, no. Like, make him do stuff. Basically, make them serve the kingdom. They'll be, I don't know if they even say they'll love it. They'll be grateful for it because they'll see the prospering of Israel or whatever. But for some reason, Rehoboam says, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that one.
Yeah. So
I'm into it.
At this point, the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel are created, and 10 of those tribes, if I'm not mistaken, are saying we're out of here. And then Judah and Benjamin remain. The tribes of Judah and Benjamin remain in the kingdom of Judah, if I'm not getting all this mixed up in my head.
No, yeah, you're fine. And I love the verbiage here where it says they departed unto their tents. And what that actually means in the speak is that they split off.
Yeah.
Not that they went away for a while. It means they actually took their peoples and had a great schism. So yeah, you're right. It's Judah and Benjamin plus the now assimilated tribe of Simeon, which had no actual territory, basically. And then Israel was everybody else.
Yeah, and Jeroboam becomes the king of Israel. And
of course,
if I remember, I think Jeroboam was like an original advisor or something to.
He was one
Solomon
of the 12 He was one of the 12. Yeah, one of the 12 superintendents over taxes and labor.
And he was promised. And he was promised by what's the prophet's name? Ahijah. That he would be king of 10 of the tribes, and I bet that was hard to believe for him at that moment because he wasn't necessarily in line to succeed, Rehoboam by any means, as far as I understand. So
let's talk about that with Ahijah then. Was Ahijah saying then that this was a good thing, that the break between the tribes was inevitable, and Jeroboam was supposed to lead the 10 tribes in righteousness while Rehoboam failed? Was that the idea? I mean, why was he being promised the 10 tribes if that represented the breakup of Israel?
Yeah, I think it was a prophecy of leaning towards righteousness, that Jeroboam was, if he followed God, he could be a great leader and he would be the king over these 10 tribes. But man, that sure didn't last long. As he begins to create groves in high places, as it is termed.
Yeah. Oh, it's unfortunate. Oh, and by the way, and you might see your teacher do something in the lesson where before each section they'll write a good leader and then add to that list. So this first part was give service, which they failed to do. And the second part, you would write trusts and obeys the Lord. And you're right. So Jeroboam was promised, as it says, a sure house or a secure kingdom if he could walk in the Lord's ways. But Jeroboam very much forfeited those promises in a number of ways. If you're in 1 Kings 12, for example, you can read through 25 through 33. One thing is he built 2 golden calves and placed them in, is it Bethel or Bethel and Dan, which are 2 northern cities, for example. So the golden calves alone are a problem. He only kept them in the northern cities. He made no effort to unite the South. I can't imagine that hatred. I mean, I see a lot of parallels to any civil war or great things that have happened before when there are very regional cultural differences between a people at some point in time, and they just like do not want to be with one another. It's just fascinating. Here's a quote here from Adam Clarke. Adam Clarke is actually quoted a lot in the Institute manuals for the Old Testament. And he says that Jeroboam, quote, invented a political religion, instituted feasts in his own times, different from those appointed by the Lord, gave the people certain objects of devotion, and pretended to think it would be both convenient and oppressive to them to have to go up to Jerusalem to worship. Inconvenient and oppressive to go to Jerusalem to worship. This was not the last time that religion was made a state engine to serve political purposes. So I love that they still felt like they needed to go to Jerusalem, which was in the south, I believe, by this point, right?
Yeah.
And they wanted to go and worship. And he convinced them that this would be a waste of time and oppressive and all that stuff. Because what was it, Hebron? Was that the center of the northern kingdom?
I believe so.
I want to say. And he really wanted to consolidate not just his power, but the focus of the people in the northern kingdom and get them away from thinking about anything related to Judah. And so, I mean, own feasts. He basically created his own religion, more or less.
If he saw the need of them wanting to go to Jerusalem and said, "You want religion? I'll give you a religion. Here's some idols. Worship them." And it's weird that he didn't. It could have been an opportunity to build something to honor Jehovah, or why you have to resort to idols. I don't know, but then the wheels really come off at that point and.
They really do. And then you even see that Ahijah basically promises after Jeroboam's son gets sick, he basically tells him, like, well, your line is going to be broken, effectively. He condemns him very much. I see a lot of parallels to our modern day with all these things. I've not been a leader of a grand group of people, but I look back on, I think on my mission I learned some of my first real lessons on leadership. And I'm sure everyone has better stories than this. But I remember, I was a district leader, I think, for the first time. And it was very easy to try to construct what I thought were valuable programs and methods and counsel to those in my district. But at the same time, it was also very easy to not ensure that I was the one setting the example at the same time. And what I saw eventually was, for one, I was getting burned out. And my fellow missionaries weren't, following me, per se. They were viewing me as somebody who simply dictated stuff that should be done. And it was a hard awakening, but when I realized more, I was better off perhaps being more silent and just leading by example, that other things would, positive things would fall into place, which in my experience is absolutely true. I think in those situations, oftentimes we just have to lead by example, and then stuff does come together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're maybe probably seeing this as well as in your elders quorum is the more autonomy you can create for those in a quorum or in a group, whether they're missionaries, and it's less of I'll dictate A, B, C, this is what you do, and do it fast and do it right. But you create purpose and autonomy in there, and you'll see that as you simply set that example and try and serve them, they get on board, they see the purpose, and they're more willing to get to the goals of serving God in the end. So
exactly. Actually, there's a quote. It comes later in the lesson, but we could read it now, by President Benson. This is a great quote. He said, "Often we spend great effort in trying to increase the activity levels in our stakes. We work diligently to raise the percentages of those attending sacrament meetings. We labor to get a higher percentage of our young men on missions. We strive to improve the numbers of those marrying in the temple. All of these are commendable efforts and important to the growth of the kingdom. But when individual members and families immerse themselves in the scriptures regularly and consistently, these other areas of activity will automatically come. Testimonies will increase. Commitment will be strengthened. Families will be fortified. Personal revelation will flow." Now, I know this quote it's for a little bit later when it talks about the value of scriptures, but I like the main principle there in and of itself, that when we are more in line with the gospel, the other stuff is a natural byproduct. of it.
Yeah, and leaders, one thing I struggle with is when I go into a new leadership situation or I'm in charge of a program or an activity, I sort of want to reinvent the wheel again and say like, oh, I'll do this great idea and it'll come out even better. But really, if we go back to the basic concepts of connecting with individuals and showing them how to live the gospel, through scripture study, church attendance, law of sacrifice, all that. I mean, that's really where the change comes and the influence.
Well, there was a great thing that you mentioned on one of your podcasts, actually, Kurt, I believe I think you stressed the value of teaching just doctrines and principles, and not focusing as much on programs and on the actions we should be taking with our responsibilities, but ensuring that people understand these scriptures and the doctrine. Because I've always believed the same thing.
Yeah, and that comes.
Go
ahead. Go. No, after you.
Oh, I was just going to say, people take action when they have a stronger base, working with something better.
And that idea comes from Elder Bednar. His first book is Act and Doctrine or something, I forget. But he talks about this concept of a lot of people, there's the application, there's the principle, and then there's the doctrine. And a lot of people, as they're teaching or they're leading, they default to the application of the principle. Here's how we home teach, here's how we do this or that. But when we really should start with the doctrine of the principle. So I'm always pushing myself, saying, I always want to think of some anecdote that I could use in my teaching that's like perfect, but I always push myself, well, let's go back to the doctrine and start there, and then maybe that anecdote can come later. But it's important to kind of have that core of doctrine, because that's truly, as President Packard has said before, to paraphrase, that the true motivation and change comes in a man by the doctrine of Jesus Christ and not by some program or application.
Exactly. All those things are just ancillary to what's at the core. And I do like that we see as the lesson goes on, Jehoshaphat, who was, I believe, the great-grandson of Rehoboam, he eventually inherits at least the southern kingdom, and he leads Judah to actually follow the Lord and his prophets.
Shows us
and
how
he does
it's done.
this. Yeah, and he does this in exactly the way it should be done. He's personally righteous. He has private devotion, but he's very obviously good, and he's doing his thing. And then I like that he actually sends Levites around to teach the people, basically, from the Scripture. And that's a great example to us, for all of us teaching by Scriptures. But who are the Levites? They were the ones that held the Levitical priesthood.
Yeah.
They were the ones authorized to engage in such activities, particularly. And so I think that alone strengthened it, because it was like similar to receiving the missionaries in your home today. Here are the authorized servants to teach my word, and there it is. So I think there's some strong stuff. We're a little short on time, so I guess we kind of wrap it up. Do you have any other thoughts on these wonderful things, Kurt? I know we're kind of blowing through the last part.
Yeah, I'll just end with the motto of leading LDS, which applies here, and that's be a leader and not a calling. Simple as that.
Yeah, I agree with that. So just and my great thing is just lead by example. I think so much can be accomplished by being personally righteous and worthy and engaged, and letting that shine through, because it will have an effect even if you think it doesn't. Absolutely it will. It makes a huge difference.
Amen, brother.
Don't dictate. Just be good and do your best part. Folks, please visit us at thisweekinmormons.com. Send us an email at contact@thisweekinmormons.com. Visit us on our social media channels, where however you've subscribed to this. Thank you. And if you would, leave reviews and comments. We appreciate that. It helps us a lot. Kurt, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Great. Go visit leadinglds.com, folks, and subscribe to his podcast on iTunes. It's good times. And everyone, this is Sunday School Bonanza. Once again, Lesson 27, The Influence of Wicked and Righteous Leaders.